Yes, thank you so much for being here. My name's Lucia, and I was in Gothenburg for 3 weeks in May, and I sadly just left. But I had a really great time as part of a research exchange with Sportfiskarna, where I learned about and contributed to sturgeon reintroduction. So I'm going to talk about that a bit today, and then I will share some of my own research for my PhD, which is in the UK. So yes, I'm Lucia, and I'm really interested in using historical data to directly inform species reintroductions. So how can we look to the past and how can we learn from the past to inform species conservation and reintroductions? My PhD is at the Zoological Society of London and the University of Reading in England, and I am researching the extinction of sturgeon in the UK to identify important historical habitat and also to determine which species were native in which rivers. So there are a lot of unknowns about sturgeon, so hopefully there's a lot to explore and learn there, and I look forward to sharing some of my findings with you. And this is just a photo of me at the museum we have on campus with a nice preserved sturgeon. And so my PhD work will directly feed into the UK Sturgeon Alliance. They have a really great name. And so I'm working with them to directly inform reintroduction planning. And hopefully we can follow what Sweden has done in the next few years. So fingers crossed. And so if you don't know what a sturgeon is, that's okay. They've been gone from Sweden for over a century and have just been reintroduced within the past couple of years. So they are a freshwater fish that spawns in freshwater, but then actually migrates out to sea, and then will come back into the freshwater rivers to breed and spawn in about 15 years or so. They can reach huge sizes, over 5 meters, and they can live incredibly long. So they can live over 100 years. And also, they evolved with basically dinosaurs 200 million years ago. So they are sometimes called a living fossil. So they're a really interesting and weird looking fish. But I think once you start to study them, you also start to fall in love with them a bit. And there are 27 species of sturgeon globally. And according to the IUCN, which is the global authority determining species conservation statuses, pretty much all of them are threatened and at risk of extinction. So this is just a map showing their status, and the red basically indicates that they're critically endangered or endangered across most of their range. So this is pretty gloomy, but a lot of work is ongoing to save them from extinction, and reintroductions have emerged as one solution to this. So if we reintroduce them to parts of their range where they've become lost or extirpated, that can help their overall status and increase sturgeon populations, and also restore our lost connection to this amazing fish. And so specifically, I'm going to talk about European and more predominantly Atlantic sturgeon, because that's the species that was reintroduced into Sweden and is native in Sweden. But European and Atlantic sturgeon overlap quite a bit in their ranges. So this is just to show you the geographic distribution of European sturgeon, which are critically endangered. And as I'm working in the UK, it says that they're possibly extinct there. So with my PhD, I'm working to determine if they were actually native to the UK, which we still don't fully understand. And then for the Atlantic sturgeon, this is their range. As you can see, they're in Canada and North America, and so amazingly, they actually swam over to Sweden, probably around 1,000 years ago. And I'm going to talk about this in the next slide. So it was actually assumed for a while that European sturgeon was the only species in Europe, the only sturgeon native to Europe. But with ancient DNA, so by sampling old sturgeon scutes, which are these plates on their back, and they're preserved in archaeological sites, by sampling those and looking at the genetics, scientists found that the sturgeon in Sweden and the Baltic were actually descended from a small founder population from Canada. So this was a really exciting finding, and this is one of the first papers on that. So if you want to learn more, I recommend looking at that. I myself am not really a geneticist yet, but it's really interesting how they figured this out. And this is so important. I think this really highlights how we need to look at historical data to inform reintroduction, because if we hadn't actually checked which species was native, it's possible the wrong species would have been reintroduced. And so now I'm going to talk more about how were historical data essential for making sturgeon reintroduction possible in Sweden. This is what I'm really interested in, and I think it's really important to look at the different lines of historical evidence to inform reintroduction and make it evidence-based and have a higher likelihood of success. So one of the first things I did when I arrived in Gothenburg was I went to the Natural History Museum, which I really enjoyed. It's a great museum, highly recommend. And I met with two lovely curators there, Kenneth and Magnus, and they showed me all the historical sturgeon specimens that they have in the collections. And what was really cool is they have some really small ones. So on the right here is a juvenile sturgeon from the Göta. So it's from the Göta River in Gothenburg from the 1800s. And it's really beautifully preserved, as you can see. And as you can also see, maybe if you can read the label, it says Acapenser sturio. So this just once again highlights that all sturgeon specimens were labeled as European sturgeon until some people like Jorn Gessner came and visited the museum, and the curators at the Natural History Museum dug into this and actually confirmed what the species were. And so how do you do this? To determine the native species, they look at the scutes. So I mentioned these are the dermal plates on the sturgeon. They have 3 rows, and you can actually look closely at them, and they have different patterns. So for instance, these ones are called alveolar, so they have this specific pattern that's diagnostic for Atlantic sturgeon. There are also other things you can look at, like the number of scutes, and also if you do genetics, of course, which was done on a few of the specimens to confirm the species. So that's really, really exciting, and that's how they determined that they were all Atlantic sturgeon, and that's 36 sturgeon specimens. And they're also all from the west coast of Sweden. I'm just going to quickly flip back because this is a really cool juvenile specimen. It's the smallest one they have in the collection, and I think it's really beautiful. So what historical evidence also supports that they were breeding in Swedish rivers? So it's not only important to determine which species was native and where, but we also need to know if they were breeding. So was there a breeding local population of sturgeon? And the juvenile specimens are really important for this. So 3 of all the specimens are juveniles, and they were caught between 1860 and 1920, ranging from 20 to 39 centimeters long. And we know that they're juveniles and they were in the river when they were caught because juveniles are documented to leave the river when they reach a length of around 76 centimeters. So that is much smaller. So that was really exciting evidence to justify the reintroduction. And when I was talking to Kenneth and Magnus, the curators at the museum, they were telling me this whole story. And when they started, their predecessor showed them that small juvenile sturgeon and said, if someday we will reintroduce sturgeon, this will be very important. And he was right. So that specimen was incredibly important. And I think we're also quite lucky that the specimens are in such good condition and they have locality information. So for a lot of my work, I work in a lot of museums to access specimens. And this is a really good museum, and the people who caught the specimens provided really detailed information. And that associated information alongside the specimen is so important. Having the locality, having the date it was caught is really valuable information. Oops. Oh, there we go. Okay. And alongside this museum specimen data, there are also historical records. So this is Linnea Jagrud, who's the project leader of the sturgeon reintroduction team at Sportfiskarna. She was my main host. And I got to go with her to Skåne to talk to some fishers who have actually caught some of the sturgeon she's released. And they are required to release the sturgeon if caught. But it's actually really been important, as you can imagine, to build this relationship with fishers because they can provide really useful information and data about the reintroduced sturgeon. So they can say where the sturgeon have been caught, what they look like, how big they are. So this is really, really useful. And so she gave a talk to some fishers and highlighted some of the really cool historical documents that also support that sturgeon were present in the past in Swedish rivers, especially the Göta. And some of these are even royal records where sturgeon were offered to the king in the 16th century. And there was even a pirate letter, which is the one shown here, in which 9 barrels of sturgeon were stolen from Danish ships. And some of them ended up at Stockholm Castle, I believe. And this is really cool because we also see this in the UK. Also in the UK, the sturgeon was declared a royal fish in the 1300s. And every sturgeon caught had to be offered to the king. And then alongside these old records, there are also more recent newspaper records that Joachim Naslund worked on. And he compiled all that data to further support that sturgeon were present in several rivers in Sweden, but most predominantly in the Göta, which is where they've been reintroduced. And also, alongside these newspaper records, you can get seasonality information. So if you know what month the sturgeon was caught, that's really valuable because we know, for instance, that Atlantic sturgeon typically spawn in the summer months. So if they were caught in rivers historically during known spawning time, that is further evidence that they were likely going into the rivers in Sweden to spawn, which means there was a local breeding population. And all these different lines of evidence came together, and Linnea reintroduced the first Atlantic sturgeon back into the Göta in Sweden on June 18th, 2024. And so I think this is really amazing. I also really love this photo. And so this just shows how different lines of evidence of historical data came together and to make this possible. And I just want to highlight again that if we did not have this evidence, if we did not have the museum specimens, if they had not been looked for, the reintroduction most certainly would not have happened. So it would not have been possible. And also, as sturgeon disappeared in Sweden over a century ago, living memory of the species has also disappeared. So it's kind of a double extinction where there's also a cultural extinction where people no longer remember this fish. And this is an example of shifting baseline syndrome, which is why I have this figure here. But the main concept is that what we perceive as normal changes with each generation as there's a loss of biodiversity and a loss of transfer of knowledge between generations. So by looking to the past, by consulting historical data, we can understand past ecological baselines and how ecosystems have changed through time. And this is important for setting appropriate conservation and reintroduction targets. And so I also want to touch on what else made this sturgeon idea of reintroduction a reality. What are some of the practical aspects that needed to happen? And so first off, I think you need a really passionate and driven team. And I was really lucky to meet and work with all of them for 3 weeks. This isn't everyone. There were many different people involved. But I just wanted to highlight Gustav Hellström, who helped tag all the fish. So it's really important to tag the sturgeon before they're released, because then we can track them and find out, for instance, where they're foraging and what habitat is most important for them. So he was really wonderful and has contributed a lot. And then Teppo actually came over from Finland, so he's not a part of the team, but like me, he was learning and contributing, and hopes that the same will also happen in Finland in the future. So he's there in the middle weighing a sturgeon. So we also recorded how heavy they all were. And then on the right is Emil Lindberg, who is one of the student interns at Sportfiskarna. So he's an intern, and now he's actually becoming employed to work for them. And here he is holding one of the sturgeons that will then go in that big tub on the truck and then be released into the river. So this would not have been possible without many people and a really great team of people. I also spent some time with them out on the river. So I talked briefly about how all the fish were tagged so we can track them. But to be able to do that successfully, you have to go out on the river and put these receivers into the river. You basically weigh them down with really heavy stones. And then they sit there at the bottom of the river for a year. And then they come back a year later to find them and extract the data from these receivers. So if within a year sturgeon swam by it, that will ping and then be recorded. So So I went with them one day to find the receivers, to then collect the data on sturgeon movement. And this is really important because it tells us where they're spending most of their time after being released. So are they still in the river? Where are they foraging? And it also tells us if they're still living. So what are survival rates after 1 year? And also, I want to say that this does not come without challenges. So I only joined this for one day, but on the one day that I went, I think we only found about 3 of 7 receivers we were trying to find. And that was a full day's work. So it's really challenging. We do have this fancy equipment that helps you locate where the receivers are, but it also requires, honestly, a lot of strength and stubbornness, because then you have to haul it out of the river, which is quite difficult. And you have to keep looking for it because there's really useful data there, and sometimes the receivers can also be moved because the river changes throughout the year. And for instance, one idea is that because it was a really cold and icy winter, that may have actually pushed some of the receivers far away from where they were deployed. So lots of challenges, but it's really cool and exciting when you get this really valuable data that can keep informing the reintroduction. And then this is just a really joyful photo of Linnea and Kim and Rikard when they successfully found one of the receivers in a really tricky spot. Yeah. And also, I would say pizza helps recovery from a hard day's work. So when we were really frustrated and unable to find some of the receivers, we satiated our frustration with pizza. And I wrote down this quote Linnea said because I thought it was so funny but also true. After pizza, I might continue as a biologist. And there she is, also multitasking as usual, extracting the data and also eating at the same time. So I think that's just a really good, it showcases how this team works. And yeah, they're doing so many amazing things. And even when it's hard and frustrating, they always have smiles on their faces. And so after all this hard work for weeks, months, you get to see the sturgeon leave their soft release cage and go out into the river for the first time, which is really amazing. So this is called a soft release because the sturgeon are put in these cages in the river for a full day to acclimate to the temperature, the current, and then they are released from that a day later. So here is just a video I took of some of the sturgeon. You can see them swimming out of the cage into the river. And this was right at Lilla Edit. Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce these place names. But it's right below the hydropower dam. And so all the sites where they've been reintroduced are in the Göta, which, as we know, is where they were historically breeding and also most abundant. And these are all happening downstream of that first migration barrier or hydropower dam. And I learned that hydropower is really important for electricity in Sweden. So this will be a really important thing to consider into the future for where do we reintroduce sturgeon, and can we also negotiate fish passes, for instance, if we can't remove dams? And that could also help other fish like salmon. So that will be important to think about. And also, 10% of the fish have been caught after 1 year. So this has just shows that it's also really important to establish these relationships with fishers who can share the data and information about when and where they're catching sturgeon. And also, Linnea shared with me that after 1 year, the survival rates were really high, like around 90%. So that's actually really, really amazing, and shows that all the hard work that's gone into raising them is helping them brave the new world out in the wild. So that's exciting. And just to summarize that, historical data have been really important for justifying and making this reintroduction possible. And it's really important to have a team of people covering so many different skill sets. So there are a lot of biologists on the team, but it's also important to have carpenters and people who can just fix things, because things can and do break. And you need someone who is really good with tools, and you need people that are good problem solvers and can improvise on the spot. And then it's also really valuable to have fishers directly involved. I had really, really nice discussions with people on the team, for instance, including Jonathan Manning, who is another student intern. And he told me that ever since the first day of his internship, there hasn't been a day where he hasn't held a fish. So it's either a sturgeon or he's going out fishing with family and friends. And I think that's really beautiful. And you also see how invested everyone is, because the river is their life. Fish are part of their life. So it's important to restore that ecosystem and for people to be a part of that. So that was really, really valuable for me to see. And lastly, stubbornness is really important. So I learned from Linnea that if things go wrong, and they will go wrong, you just have to keep trying and be creative about how to fix things and to learn from mistakes and trial and error. And so now I'm just going to talk a bit about what am I actually doing. So I learned a lot from the Swedish team, and I'm planning to bring back and share this knowledge with the UK Sturgeon Alliance. So hopefully a reintroduction will be in the works in the near future. But we still have a lot of unknowns in the UK. So I am exploring what historical archives exist for sturgeon, and what do they tell us about past sturgeon habitat and exploitation. And we also need to figure out which species were actually native. And this is a fun photo from the Natural History Museum in London. This is really odd, but this is a sturgeon that was pressed like a flower onto paper in the 1700s. So I'm sorry, I forget the name of who did it, but he was the son of like a botanist who actually preserved a lot of beautiful plants like that. And then I think his son had the idea to do the same with fish. And that kind of sounds gross, but when you see the specimen, it's actually quite beautifully pressed on the paper. So I wanted to share that. Yeah, you never know what you find in museums. There are a lot of hidden treasures back behind the scenes. And so, as I also briefly mentioned, the sturgeon were declared a royal fish in the 1300s by Edward II. And that was because of their superior excellence, possibly because people thought they tasted quite nice. And so what I've done so far is I went to several different archives, including Windsor and Kew, which was really, really special. I got to get a special pass and go up into the tower and look at some really old letters like this one right here. And I compiled 54 records. And then in addition to this, I also compiled data about museum and archaeological sturgeon specimens from the UK. So bringing together these different lines of historical evidence. And what I've found so far, this is in progress, I'm actually writing it up right now, is this just shows that sturgeon were historically caught all over the UK, and also from Northern Ireland, from the 1300s to 1900s. You can also see most of them are more recent records, but I think it's quite a large range. And these were all offered to the king, so that's also pretty crazy, that they were being transported large distances. I think especially with the trains, that made that more possible. And then I just pulled out some fun anecdotes that come with these records. And this just shows there's also some large data gaps. So with historical data, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so that does not represent sturgeon absence, but reporting effort, for instance, and also possibly interest in catching sturgeon. So we see more records after the 1800s, and you can see that some people even noted a sturgeon of this size as a rare catch here at any time. So that already suggests that baselines are shifting, and perhaps they were starting to catch smaller sturgeon because the large ones had been overfished earlier. And you also get some valuable weight information about the fish. So apparently this royal sturgeon was 16 stones. That's very large. And someone even said it seems hardly worthwhile claiming these fish. So there are some records where people just didn't want to bother catching them because sometimes they were so large it was physically demanding to get them out of the river. And then also if you had to give it away to the king, people weren't always happy about that. So yeah. And then when you look at the months in which they were caught, the legend here is just showing different rivers in the UK. And basically when we look at the months, we see that the rivers are showing up between the months of April and July. So sturgeon were caught in the rivers historically late spring and summer, which aligns with their known spawning time. So that's also some exciting information. And then the River Severn comes up most commonly. So that is why for reintroduction planning, we're considering the River Severn as the major reintroduction site. And here's an old photograph of a sturgeon that was caught from the Severn in the 1800s. And I think it's funny that someone who's 6'3" was invited to stand next to it. So you can see how large that sturgeon was. And also I came across this photograph and I absolutely love it. So you can see this whole family taking their photos with this sturgeon. So you can see it was a thing to be proud of. And there was this cultural relationship to this fish. And then, so in addition to those royal records, as I said, I also compiled archaeological specimen data and museum specimen data. And this is just showing that these different data types represent different locations and also time periods. So when we look at archaeological specimens, which are like the sturgeon scutes that are preserved, that tells us about where they were before the historical era. So that can tell us where sturgeon were up to 10,000 years ago. So that's really valuable to also include. And so my data so far shows that there was likely a historical breeding sturgeon population in the UK. And I'm halfway through my PhD, so right now I'm gathering all these specimens to do ancient DNA analysis on them to confirm which species were actually native and in which rivers, which will directly inform reintroduction planning. And this is the sturgeon I sampled from Belfast. So I took that funny photo with it. And also exciting news, I contributed to a paper that was just accepted into Royal Society Open Science, which brings together all the historical evidence for sturgeon breeding in the UK, which I think will be an important first step for reintroduction planning. And I studied this sturgeon scoot that was really small. And so I took some measurements on it, and it was Roman, and it was from Canterbury, England. And it's evidence of a juvenile sturgeon. So it's the only archaeological specimen we've found so far that is a juvenile sturgeon from the Roman period in the UK. So that's included in the paper. And yeah, it should be published soon. So if you're interested, keep an eye out or contact me. And lastly, I really just want to highlight that historical data can often contain some really useful information for species reintroductions and conservation. But despite this, it still remains largely overlooked and underused by conservation practitioners and in conservation planning. And so I encourage you to explore the different kinds of historical data and what historical data might be relevant for your work. And also, I recommend collaborating or just having discussions with archaeologists, historical ecologists, archivists. I think it's really useful to talk to people in different disciplines because you never know what those connections might lead to. And you also don't know what data might be out there that's actually really useful for your work. So I really love bridging these disciplines and doing interdisciplinary work. So I just want to end with that. And this would not have been possible without so many people. I was funded by the World Sturgeon Conservation Society. So if you happen to be studying sturgeon, find them because they offer student grants and really, really wonderful society. And then, of course, Sport Fiskarna and all the people on the team who really, really welcomed me and I learned so much from. So I want to thank Linnea, Rikard, Matthias, Kim, Joachim, Gustav, Emil, Eric, Jonathan, and many more. So yeah, thank you so much. Tack så mycket. And also on my last day, they even let me swim or snorkel with the sturgeon. So that was a great end to my trip. Oh yeah, that's all. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions.